live stream this time.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery, and welcome to Monk Chat. This evening, it will be with myself, Ayasoma, and Bhante Jayasara, who is currently staying for the Vasa here at Empty Cloud Monastery. And good to see you, Rick and Denise, good friend. So lovely to see your name. And hello, Geeta, Lucy, Jayanta, and everyone else who's slowly checking in. Karen, welcome. So whenever you're ready, feel free to type in your questions, and Bhante, Jay, and myself will try our best to answer them. Hello to Maria, Kumu, and of course also the residents here at Empty Cloud are welcome to ask any type of questions, and as long as they're somewhat vaguely related to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, we can answer them. If you're going to ask us other questions, such as questions on sports or on politics or on
global macroeconomics,
definitely that I would not, I mean, even when I was a lay person, I would have probably not been able to answer. But good to see you, Sud and Kevin. I think Sud probably can answer the global macroeconomics. Jayanta definitely can answer those. So we can have maybe a series of lay chat instead of monk chat where we can forward those questions. And hello, Kevin, John, Janaki. So lots of friends coming in, but no questions yet. So.
All right, we're done. Good night, everybody.
Or maybe, Bhante, you can ask the questions and give yourself an answer. Oh, Sid says, I live under a rock nowadays myself. Great. Isn't that wonderful? It's the side effect, which is actually a good side effect of practicing more and more the Dhamma. You're like, okay, this is the nature of samsara. What am I going to do? And Dhamma Learner says, missed the opening of tonight's discussion. I was waiting on next week's queue. Oh, great. I love it. Because actually I did put last night I got the wrong live stream, but this time I got the right live stream. I actually established mindfulness, read through all the dates and titles and clicked on the proper one. But I see that Dharma Learner and I have switched roles and tuned in the other one. So there's no discussion tonight. It's just answers if there's going to be any questions. And great, Lucy has one question. And Lucy asks, how would you recommend doing meditation on anicca? Okay.
Yeah, sure. Well, the whole practice is really a practice, a meditation on anicca. Right? Anicca is at the core of everything in our experience. Right? The Buddha says that there's 3 characteristics of existence, and all 3 flow from anicca. Right? The fact that everything is impermanent, but not only that, everything is unstable and undependable. So if you want to do a meditation on anicca, reflect on everything in your experience that you see as unstable and undependable. Right? How about that body of yours? Is that stable? Is that dependable? How about your vehicle, your job, your relationship, all these things, right? Reflecting on what is stable. Asking yourself, what's stable? What's dependable? What's permanent? Now, of course, when you're practicing something like anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, you're able to see anicca right in the breath. How the breath is changing. Right? In the beginning, it's your focus and your tranquility of mind is not quite there. But then as you keep staying with the breath, following with the breath, your mind becomes more tranquil, calm. Then you start to see anicca And then you get into the jhanas. Then you can really start to see anicca at a deeper and deeper levels, because your mind is ever more clear, calm, tranquil, able to see. So practice any aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path that you're practicing, you can use to reflect and to see anicca.
Great, thank you, Bante. And Sud asks, can you give some advice if you could give some advice as to how to go about strengthening one's practice of sati sampajanya while engaged in activity? So for those of you who don't know Pali, we can translate it as, usually it's translated as mindfulness and clear comprehension. Well, I would say first and foremost, actually, the advice that Bhante Sudaso gives all the time, which is very useful, very practical, and very simple. And it's always going back to our feet, the sensations of the feet on the ground. So that is a physical sensation that we can literally just experience in every single moment, whenever we are engaging with others, whenever we're going from one point to the other, whenever we are literally standing or walking or talking or getting bored or getting irritated and so forth, or having aversion with whatever we're experiencing, or maybe simply we're washing the dishes and chatting, multitasking, and etc., and our mind kind of goes all over the place. We can easily go back to the feet, to that physical sensation, and it's very helpful. So that is one sort of suggestion that comes to mind. And another suggestion of strengthening it is also understanding the purpose. Why are we actually doing all these practices to develop mindfulness and clear comprehension? Well, actually, in the word clear comprehension, we should get a hint. What are we trying to be clearly comprehending what? So it's not that we're trying to develop mindfulness to be present right here, right now, like in the present moment, for the sake of just being in the present moment, for the sake of like kind of seizing the day, as the Romans used to say. But rather, we're cultivating this practice to have clear comprehension, and how in every morning, also every morning, but every moment, greed, hatred, and delusion manifest in the mind. To clearly see exactly the workings in the mind, so that then we can dismantle them. So essentially, when we're doing this practice, when we're going about our day, actually we have lots of incredible opportunities to see if we're really looking, if we really have the curiosity, the interest to understand the mind, to understand, the workings of the heart. Really investigating our experience, really looking, okay, well, this is my experience right here, right now. And I might be going on this tangent, on this story, or like maybe I don't like this person, or I don't like to do this job, or maybe I'm actually having a really intense craving of ice cream and I'm really enjoying this ice cream right now, etc. And so aside from like being, clearly greeting, comprehending greed in the sense of like just being in the moment or whatever, we're actually in the moment, maybe indulging in greed, but really looking at, whoa, this is what greed feels like. This is how it manifests. Wow, this is actually a little bit more uncomfortable. Even the experience of ice cream is not as great as I thought it was. I mean, the creamy part of the ice cream is great, but the ice part of the ice cream, for example, maybe that's a little bit, or maybe it was great in August, but now that it's September and it's getting chilly, it's not as great as it used to be. So we start looking at our experience with more interest, with more curiosity. we also see how we approach others, and maybe the same activity has a different connotations based on other causes and conditions that come into being. So we're present, we're clearly comprehending, we're mindful, we're there, but at the same time, we're not just, blindly mindful or keeping on doing the same thing with some pseudo awareness, but rather we're actually investigating our experience and then applying the Dhamma to our experience. So this is what comes to mind. I don't know if Bhante Jay has any other thoughts.
No, that's right. We got, while you were talking, a bunch of good meditation questions have come in. So
excellent.
We have plenty of stuff to talk about.
Great. Jay Lyle says, are there any instances in the suttas of one healing another with metta?
Not that I know of. So this is one of those kind of misconceptions that a lot of Westerners or Buddhist converts kind of have of metta. They kind of mix it up with this kind of new agey, like sending vibes, man. I'm going to send my metta vibes and that's going to heal somebody, right? My preceptor, Bhante Gunaratana, Bhante G, says metta is not magic, right? Metta is not about sending vibes out into the universe. Metta is about cleansing your own mind of ill will and developing warm-hearted feelings of friendship for all beings. Right? This is a very, very important thing to understand. You don't see in the you don't see in the suttas the Buddha or somebody sending out their metta vibes and that helps somebody, right? Somebody with metta and compassion might do something to help somebody. That's different. But no, there's no metta vibes going out that heal or help another person. There is an interesting study from years back. I don't remember the details, but it was something to the effect of, like, I don't know if it was that the people knew that they were being prayed for or thought about and they had better outcomes, or they didn't know and they had better outcomes. But some kind of well-wishing does seem to maybe help, but as somebody else in some way, I don't know. But we should be very clear of what metta is and what its purpose is and what it's not in this regard.
Great, thank you. And Kumu asks, what is your favorite meditation? Also, have you tried all of the meditations on mindfulness of the body in the Satipatthana Sutta? What is my favorite meditation? Well, actually, I really love the 4 elements meditation and mindfulness of emotions, which is one of my main meditation practices. And have I tried? Yes, actually, I'm also doing a course right now with Venerable Dhammadina, who is the other only Italian bhikkhuni. There's 2 of them. One is me, and the other one is Venerable Dhammadina. And every Monday, I'm actually doing a course on the Satipatthana with her. So I actually just we just finished all the practices on the mindfulness of the body, but I have done them before. But it's always great whenever actually you have the opportunity to learn with another monastic. There's just a different sort of layer of investigation of the Dhamma that just deepens, that perhaps also one's practice deepens, obviously throughout the years. And so it's just always beautiful. It never grows old. As a matter of fact, actually, the more we do the same practices, the more we learn, the more we read the suttas, the same suttas, the more we learn, the more we understand things better. Bhante, what is your favorite meditation?
Oh, well, Satipatthana.
Great.
Satipatthana. Have I tried all of the 5 or 6 meditation? I've done everything in Satipatthana for many years. Satipatthana is like you're carrying around a toolbox and something comes up and you're like, well, I think I'm going to need the 5/4 body contemplation, and just take out the tool and you start using it. Right? Satipatthana, it has so many wonderful, wonderful meditations, contemplations, reflections. And it can be, you could spend 24/7, 365 as long as you're awake, using and practicing Satipatthana on some part of your experience. So yeah, Satipatthana is tops. I mean, it is the direct path for the purification of beings. within 7 days.
In the Deva terms.
That's right.
Because Deva say is
but-
like, I don't know, many eons.
At Bhavana Society, the Satipatthana retreat, the first time I took it, Bhante Siddhananda says, if you practice very well, by the end of this retreat, you could become awakened. I never became awakened at the end of the retreat, so obviously I didn't practice it quite right.
And Diego says, could you speak on how or why the Brahma viharas can take you all the way to nibbana? Bhante?
So yeah, the Brahma viharas can act as a samatha practice, right? There are some people, I don't know if Bhante Analayo still does this, but I know, years back he listening to something and he talked about how he does metta practice instead of mindfulness of breathing for his samatha practice. Samatha practice means a practice that is that you do to develop tranquility and calmness in mind and one-pointedness in mind, right? Anapanasati is one of those practices. Metta can be another one of those practices. These practices that calm and tranquilize the mind. And it's when you practice these practices in such a way that you can go from metta into deep jhanas, and you can really, really see things as they are. But you could also reflect in the one sutta on the man from Anatta, I forgot. It's the one in the Majjhima Nikaya where the Ananda explains 11 ways of where you can essentially switch to insight and go and become awakened. I think this is where Diego is bringing this from, because the 4 Brahma viharas are such ways. And so you reflect on this metta. Well, this metta is impermanent. This metta is dukkha. It's suffering. I can't heal people with my magic metta ways. It's not as good. It's just, it's not. So it's dukkha. And this metta is not self, not me, not mine, not myself. So it's when you, in any of these, the Brahma viharas, you reflect on the 3 characteristics of existence in relation to those Brahma viharas. And that can be a vehicle for insight for you to become awakened.
And Lucy asks, often when I meditate for extended periods of time, maybe 30 minutes or so, I start to get a headache in my forehead. Any ideas what I might be doing wrong? Well, when I actually had a similar experience was when I had first started meditating, and I was actually trying a little too hard. Actually, it was a metta retreat, and I was like, may everyone be happy. Literally, I was trying very hard because it was not coming naturally to me to cultivate this metta. So I was like, all right, I really need to put effort into to cultivating this thing. It kind of turned out that instead of metta, I was cultivating a lot of irritation and stress, radiating stress, and also getting a big headache. And because it was a long retreat, then after a while I was just like, all right, whatever, may everyone be happy. And I just kind of relaxed. And then I was like, oh, may everyone be happy. And I just really meant it. And I also started including myself, going like, oh, may I be, free from this headache, but not in terms of like, oh, can't this like headache leave me alone, but rather I'm maybe free from it. Like kind of, oh, may I be free from all this dukkha. And all of a sudden, metta started arising. And I was like, oh, this actually feels quite good. Maybe I think I'm on the sort of the right path. And sometimes you need to relax a little bit, calm down a little bit, stop trying too hard. And and everything is easier. was the same actually with the practice of silent illumination. Sometimes it can be very, very difficult not to have one particular meditation object. Until one day I was actually kind of tired, and I was too tired to think, but not as tired to fall asleep. And I kind of just relaxed on the cushion, and bam, like objectless meditation. So it might be that. That's what comes to mind. I don't know if Bante, you have other suggestions?
Sounds about right.
And Kumu just had ice cream. I hope you had more cream than ice. And Dharma Learner says, good evening, Bante. The morning talk was very helpful. Can you speak more on practical method a layperson can use when trying to separate I out of my thoughts when in meditation? Is it better to view my thoughts as in the third person? Thank you.
I don't know about viewing thoughts as in the third person. I don't know. That's an interesting one. I've never come across that, nor have I ever done that. It really is one of the important things about thoughts is this, right? And I don't know that I exactly explained it this morning, but I do often say this is, remember the Sariputta is going through not attaching, not grasping, and not identifying with any of the internal and the external sense bases, right? Internal, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. External, sight, sound, smell, sight, smell, sound, odor, taste, tactile sensation, and thought. That's an interesting one, isn't it? The Buddha classifies thoughts and things that arise in the mind as external. Bahida, literally not of the self. Internal is of the self, within the self. External, not of the self. So thoughts, according to the Buddha, are not yours. It's an interesting thing to contemplate, isn't it? Interesting thing to reflect on. Thoughts are not yours. Ideally, you need to see these things really through insight that is arising. You can't kind of like mantra your way to it. Although kind of doing reflections does help. I think I mentioned with that technique that Bhante Silananda taught me at the retreat years and years ago when I was a layperson visiting Bhavana. Right? Whatever experience arises, apply the 6 factors. Oh, I have pain. This pain is impermanent. This pain is unsatisfactory. This pain is soulless. This pain is not me. This pain is not mine. This pain is not myself. Oh, I have pleasure. This pleasure is impermanent. This pleasure is unsatisfactory. This pleasure is soulless. This pleasure is not me, not mine, not myself. Right? So reflecting on the 3 characteristics of existence in all of your experience, this is how you can practically reflect on these things. Always questioning when a thought arises, is this right? When a perception, when you perceive something, you walk into a room and you perceive something, is this right? Right? The questioning of these things that are arising in the mind puts you in the habit of not automatically just identifying and accepting what is arising. Questioning and investigating. Questioning and investigating. It's a very important mindset, very important attitude to have. Where did this thought come from? Is this thought useful? Is it harmful or beneficial to me? Why do I always identify with this view? Why do I think it's right? Right? And this puts you down all these kind of rabbit hole reflections of going against the grain. The grain is unmindfully accepting and going along with whatever arises. You want to start going against the grain. And as you do that, and as you just naturally follow the Noble Eightfold Path, do your Sila, Samadhi, and Panya, your mind, your mind will start to have insights into this not self, into this anatta. It will just start to naturally happen. This is why I always tell people, like people who are Buddhist converts or thinking about going to Buddhism, that at minimum you should have an open mind about things like karma, rebirth, devas, etc., because when you really follow the path has you question everything you hold dear. Even this fact that, well, I'm me, and this is mine. So apply the 6 factors and always question what arises. And that should be practical use for that.
Right. And FNU says, how can I join your gang? Well, it depends on which gang you're talking about. So if it's the monastic gang, then you should go to a monastery and see, first of all, if you actually really want to join the gang after living with the gang for a while.
Do the gang signs. You have to be able to do to monastic with your M-O. Anjali.
And then you request joining it. Yeah.
Yeah. I joined. That's an interesting. I've never had that one said in that way before. That's pretty funny.
And Denise says, any tips on how to avoid falling into the aware me versus the unaware me situation? I'm trying to accept both as the current state of reality, but I keep getting caught. Help. Not sure I quite understand, but I think maybe you might be referring to that there are some times where you're mindful and sometimes where you're not, possibly. Do you think that's the correct reading? Or
yes, yeah, that's kind of what I get out of it.
Yeah, so I would say that it's kind of connected actually to what Bhante Jay was talking about earlier. And so essentially, and it's also actually connected to the Satipatthana. So actually one of the directions that the Buddha gives us is also to understand a deluded mind as a deluded mind, for example. And so how do we do that? When we are deluded, when we're having the experience of delusion, we can still be mindful about it. Or when we catch ourselves being unmindful, we can reestablish mindfulness and also understand what it means to have a confused mind, what it means to have a deluded mind, what it means to have a mind of craving, and so forth. So rather than the aware me or the unaware me, or having this kind of idea that, essentially only an enlightened being is mindful in every single moment. So the unmindfulness is part of our experience of going into the path, and we need to investigate that as well. So trying to accept both as the current state of reality, that's exactly, it is the way things are. But I would say to go further, to develop curiosity towards it, because sometimes we can be a little bit apathetic when we're like, okay, it's just like this. Okay, let me keep on eating ice cream unmindfully and just following whatever kind of train thought that I have, or whatever kind of craving. or not investigate too much, but rather, just really, really look at the experience. These days, for example, my body doesn't work as these days, actually, these years. Now it's been a while. My body doesn't work as great as it used to be. It used to be a really reliable body. I remember those days when I was very much, attached to health.
The 40s.
Yeah. Or the late 30s, actually. For me, it was the late 30s were like,
that's
what
when
the
it
hell?
started, yeah.
But yeah, so all of a sudden, even right now, actually, my mind is a little bit cloudy, and it's just part of having a bunch of imbalances in the body. And at the very beginning, I was really upset about it, and I was fighting so hard, so much with it. And I'm like, oh, it's impeding my practice. How can I practice, when my body is creating all these obstacles and so forth. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Look at all these opportunities that I have to see how the deluded, unmindful mind works. So it's actually excellent. Every opportunity is an opportunity for practice. So this is what comes to mind for me. Bhante, do you have any other pointers?
Yeah, well, the only thing I would say is don't identifying it as the aware me and the unaware me. It's not helpful. Identify it as I was talking about Satipatthana. Awareness is in my mind. Awareness is not in my mind, right? Or awareness has arisen. Awareness has not arisen. I think that's better because then this way it's not like attention. Oh, well, I can't stand the unaware me. The unaware me is the bad me, and the aware me is the really good me. The aware me is like the real Buddhist me, right? Thoughts like this arise. That's the only thing I would say, is to not identify a quality of your mind being there or not being there as me. Yeah, that's all. Everything else is fine.
J. Lyles asks, is using a credit card not technically handling money a violation of the Vinaya? Also, is smoking cigarettes or chewing betel nuts, I assume, also a violation of the Vinaya? So from my understanding, smoking cigarettes and chewing betel nuts is not a violation of the Vinaya. And using a credit card, well, if it's a gift credit card, it's definitely not a violation of the Vinaya, because it applies like basically any type of gift card is, there is a particular rule that sorts those things out, so it's okay. Now, in terms of the using the actual credit card is one of those great things that us monastics love to quarrel about. And different communities will have different views on the subject matter. So strictly speaking, literally speaking, right, is not a violation, because obviously there weren't credit cards at the time of the Buddha. But perhaps maybe it's a breach of the spirit of the rule, maybe, who knows? So each community will have a different interpretation.
Yeah. Credit cards and stuff. That's a very, very complicated, nuanced subject. Very complicated, very nuanced.
Yeah.
And like Aya said, that different communities will have different views on things. You can the Buddhist Monastic Code by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, he goes over a few different things, and there's things like, well, if you sign it, like, I guess this is also pretty old. Like these days, you don't have to even do things like sign and all the old ways that they used to have to do credit cards. But yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, if you want to get a headache, you can just ordain and study those precepts in detail and fight with other monastics.
Because it's not just one rule that's involved; it's multiple rules. Like one rule, somebody could say, "Well, the rule of having the credit card, that's not a breach, but then trading with it, that might be a breach." It gets complicated. So I wouldn't worry about it. If you're worried about like seeing if a monastic is a good monastic if they use money, well, the majority of monastics in the world use money these days. So that's unfortunately, even though we're not supposed to, one way or the other, they use money, whether it's Thailand, Sri Lanka, wherever. And not even to say in the other traditions where that it's not a strict rule.
Yeah, and also on that subject, I'm pretty sure that Queen Elizabeth, may she have a good rebirth, also did not handle money. So not necessarily the not handling money, equals like complete purity and straight to nibbana. And I don't handle money, so I'm pretty, I really like that precept. But but it's important not to judge monastics who instead handle money just because there's there's pachitya, or there's like the samanera precept, and have those conceits of superiority, or if we're lay people starting to be too judgmental. It's good to ask questions perhaps, but not go to that with that perspective. PJ says, mudita meditation is used to cultivate appreciative joy at the success and good fortune of others. Is mudita also for people who receive a good fortune from their unwholesome actions? 1 second. Mudita meditation is used to cultivate appreciative joy at the success and good fortune of others. Oh, actually, why don't you take it, Bhante?
So what's going on here is a judgment. All right. Well, should I withhold my mudita for this person because they might have gotten their success unwholesomely? Right? No, you shouldn't. No, mudita. So if you look in the suttas, how the Buddha says to practice the 4 Brahma viharas, it's the same exact way. To all beings everywhere, without any distinction, any categorization, discrimination, not mudita for these people, but not for these people. Right? Mudita is just simply about that somebody, if you appreciate that people are experiencing something good. Because when you know about samsara and you realize, well, geez, this place is a pretty big hellhole, and every once in a while some people get to experience some nice things. That's nice. So it's like you can appreciate when people are experiencing something positive. Now, if you are really overly concerned about whether the person has their success or good fortune due to wholesome or unwholesome actions, that's when you reflect on kamma. Right? The Buddha in the sutta, is it 5.57 or 9? 5 ways of dealing with anger towards a person. Right? Metta is there. Compassion is there. Equanimity is there. Mudita is actually not there, which is interestingly enough. So if you're having agitation towards a person, it's like, oh, well, they don't deserve that, because they're unwholesome or whatever, because of that judgmental mind that arises, then you reflect on these things. You give them metta, give them compassion, develop equanimity, avoid them, or worst comes to worst, you reflect on that they're the owners of their actions. Right? They are creating karma that is not going to be skillful for them, not going to be helpful and beneficial for them in the future. Now, you don't want to do that. It's like, they're going to get theirs anyway. They better enjoy their good fortune now because they're going to hell. Right? No, then you're not doing it right. You're not doing it right. Right? These are normal mental processes, right? We don't like when we sense some kind of unfairness. right? Or that somebody cheated or did something unskillful to get what they have. But we don't like that, obviously. So you reflect on that, and still don't have that stop you from, reflecting on that. When somebody's doing something good, you reflect, oh, I too have had that, I too have done that. And if you see somebody say, oh, they're getting their good fortune badly, you would say, well, I too have done that too. If not in this lifetime, then in past lifetimes, right? So reflecting on that. So mudita is very good practice, but don't let your resentment or agitation or righteous indignation get in the way of practicing mudita.
And Jay Kala says, do you also incorporate the aggregates and doctrinal categories part of the Dhammanupassana section? I know it's believed to be a later edition. Any thoughts on that and value you may have gotten? Well, personally, actually, this with pretty much any practice of meditation, it's probably because of my past kamma as a layperson, being a creative type. What I like to do is absorb the information and then be a little bit creative with it, which doesn't mean like spacing out and doing whatever I want, but rather looking at my experience based on the teachings that have been given to me. So actually my practice of mindfulness of emotions is exactly that. So is it like it's both Chittanupassana, Dhammanupassana, and Vedananupassana, but also Kayanupassana a little bit too. And it's just essentially, but not going like, oh, right now I am practicing Chittanupassana and like, wait, well, the steps and like, like it. Otherwise, my mind doesn't work that way. Like I would not be capable of meditating. I would not be capable of actually being there with my experience. It would just become like a sort of more doctrinal thing. So I feel like we understand the Dhamma. My way of approaching practice anyway is to understand, or do my best to understand the teachings that are shared and then close the book and practice. So of course you first need to open the book, so to speak, before you close it. But ultimately I'm very much a fan of the Ajahn Chah way, the Ajahn Chah style of like closing it up, or the Zen style of closing it up. And so when we get into like too much and like how you phrased it, I feel like incorporating the aggregates, how are you doing it? Rather than just saying incorporating the aggregates, how are you actually incorporating the aggregates? So that's more what comes to mind. Bhante?
I don't think that that I specifically like, okay, now for the next hour, I'm going to study the aggregates, or I'm going to study the 5 hindrances, or I'm going to study, like all the things under Dhammanupassana. I guess the hindrances I do. The hindrances, when I'm doing mindfulness of breathing, that's what I'm dealing with. I'm investigating the hindrances all the time. But for the more, as you say, doctrinal, contemplative aspects of Dhammanupassana, I don't really have a direct practice for them that I've done, but it's something like the aggregates. Some of the aggregates are gross, meaning you can see them fairly clearly, and some of them are more subtle, so they're harder to see. So just keeping an eye out on what I'm observing, but I don't have specific practices that I do for those specific things. No.
And Jerry says, please give some Google keywords for the 4 elements meditation the way you like. I don't think I understand.
Is there, whoever does whatever element meditation you do, if somebody does it, like, can you tell him what to Google so he can find it online? Like if Ajahn such and such does the 4 keywords.
Oh, well, you can go on our channel. There's actually Ajahn Pasano who gave a beautiful teaching on the 4 elements meditation right there. Ajahn Pasano and 4 elements, possibly
There it is.
But for my favorite monastic and one of my favorite meditation practices. So, all right. And Sud says, does cultivation of metta bring us closer to enlightenment, or is it that we are nowhere close until we start insight practice? If the latter is true, why is it recommended that we cultivate metta? Bhante?
Again, you need to think of the Noble Eightfold Path as a total practice, right? There's lots of different aspects. There's lots of different spokes, and they're all moving towards the same direction. No, you can't just become, if the only thing you ever do is metta, no, you're not going to become awakened. No. But if you practice lots of metta in conjunction with the rest of the path, then that will be a huge help in you becoming awakened. Right? We have 3 akusala mula, right? 3 unwholesome roots: greed, hatred, and delusion. Well, metta itself is responsible for going against, being the direct practice to counteract one of those 3. So that's a pretty important big practice, right? So metta is an invaluable part of the path, but is not the whole path in and of itself. Right? So metta is part, not whole.
And Wendy says, what to do when you don't have anyone or a pet, etc., for whom it is easy to actually feel the metta? Well, Wendy, first we have to acknowledge that is a problem. That if there is not someone, any sentient being for whom it's easy to actually feel the metta, then we need to grow our metta. This being said, what we can perhaps use is, instead of like just a person and generally like cultivating metta towards them, because then maybe if we have a very strongly aversive mind, we'll start going like, oh, may they be happy, but actually, that one time, that summer in 1979, they told me that thing, and or whatever it is that comes up in the mind. Perhaps instead of like people per se, or pets, or whatever it is, one sentient being, maybe we can focus on actions. Like, for example, oh, that I don't know, surprise birthday cake that they gave me the other day. Oh, that's so sweet. Or that person who opened the door for me while I was carrying all my heavy luggage. Oh, how sweet, how kind, how nice. Or maybe we see people that are demonstrating affection with one another. Maybe it can also be a movie scene, or whatever it is that inspires you, like that kind of softness of heart, that like delight on the beauty of the human heart, and kind of do a sort of collage in your mind, and bring it up, going like, oh, wow, that's just so beautiful, so sweet. Oh, may everyone behave in that way. May I behave in that way. May people behave in that way with me. May I behave in that way with others. And keeping on growing that momentum. So, it's not terribly important to have metta for one particular person, but rather what's important is the end goal. So the end goal is to imbue our mind with loving kindness, not with loving kindness with that particular person, for that particular person, or for that particular individual, but rather to cultivate metta in the mind. And then, of course, the more you cultivate metta, then the more you're capable of having metta for everyone that you encounter, or at least for a lot of people that you encounter. And then it will be easier just to bring up someone. But we use that as means to an end, not as an end in and of itself. And Kumu says, reading the suttas of Majjhima Nikaya, we find so many suttas describing the jhanas. Are they really that important to attain, or can one move on the path without jhana 1 to 4? Are the jhanas 1 to 4 absolutely necessary for a high level of samadhi to get good insight into anicca, dukkha, and anatta? Here we get into the frequently asked questions in Buddhism. So obviously each monastic you'll ask, they'll have a different answer. So let's see which answer Bhante will give.
So jhana, as you say, like the Buddha talks about jhana hundreds of times over 5,000 pages. Jhana is extremely important according to the early texts. That being said, different people have different proclivities and tendencies, right? For some people, they might be more inclined towards a satipatthana, like direct mindfulness practice. Some people might be more inclined towards samadhi practice, jhana practice. But eventually, as the practice deepens, they converge, right? The person at the end has both samatha and vipassana, right? It has both samadhi and satipatthana, right? Mindfulness and concentration. These two things, right? If you look at the Noble Eightfold Path, the four jhanas are the eighth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path that abide supported by the other seven. So even if you are like, well, I'm kind of not that advanced. I don't know about this jhana thing. I might not, seems kind of advanced for me. Just keep practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. Eventually you'll get there. Right? This is what happened to me on a much, much less level. Right? Because I was like, with my breathing issues and all kinds of stuff. I can't do this mindfulness of breathing. I don't even think about jhanas. I can't even get this far. I just practice lots of satipatthana. And then all of a sudden I'm in, deep, deep, tranquil states of mind and easily following my breath because I practice satipatthana. Right? And so that pointed to me like, oh yeah, no, the Buddha's right. Yeah. Whichever way kind of gets you there, eventually you get there. Right there. So both are important, but different people will have different proclivities as to what is more what they focus on.
Awesome. Thank you, Bante. And Hasanta says, very interesting ideas, but I don't get how we're meant to have right thought if they're not ours to have. Well, I think you're referring to samadhi, which sometimes it's translated as right view, and sometimes I've seen it translated as right thought. And that's actually what becomes problematic with translations, is that then we can get easily confused because we can get stuck with the sort of etymology or the kind of idea that English word or that Italian word or that German word or whatever kind of word that the Pali has been translated in means, or the connotation that it has. So samadhi is not to have a thought. Actually, it's actually quite the opposite in the sense of usually we go about the world with beliefs, with ideas about the world. For example, back in the day, they thought the world was flat, or they thought that, just by crossing the Atlantic, they would have found India, because they were used to go from Europe, And so there's these kind of ideas that one goes to it. In these cases, actually biological inference. My experience of the world is flat, or my experience, I think that by going there, I'm sure that I'm going to be going from there. And we believe in it. We actually can have a sort of really sure conviction that that is true, but it's just based on speculation. It's based on our culture. It's based on like so many different things. So the approach that the Buddha is giving us instead is not to, hey, and now here is the Buddhist view on how things are in the world, but rather it's actually an understanding of how things are. And so when we have that correct understanding, I think I like more correct understanding, correct truth, or something like that, for samadhi, then we're capable, it supports the development, what we can have a correct, perspective. And we can then have all the supports to change entirely our life and then cultivate also the qualities of mind. But if we have a wrong understanding, a wrong view of how things are, essentially, then we'll have bit of a problem because we're like, well, I don't know about, this right livelihood, for example. I'm pretty sure that my family business of butchers has always, um, done really well with the family. And now, actually, with industrialized farming, I am even wealthier than like my relatives. So I won't change my livelihood. So I'll have this other type of livelihood because in my culture it's perfectly acceptable to be a butcher kind of thing. So yeah, instead is to really investigate and understand and see it for ourselves. And Bante, I don't know if you want to say anything.
No, it's fine.
Rick says, what is the relationship between the hindrance of doubt and greed, aversion, and delusion? Do you want to take this?
Oh, the hindrance of doubt and greed, hatred, and delusion. All right. The relationship between the hindrance of doubt. Well, Vicikiccha is usually described as doubt of the path, right? Doubt of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, right? Doubt that maybe that the Buddha wasn't really awakened, or that this path really doesn't lead to awakening, etc. And obviously, because we have greed, hatred, and delusion, because we don't see things clearly, then we have doubts. Once we see things clearly, so it's kind of like you walk around life, you go around life and you have glasses, but they're like really, 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 really foggy, hazy. Like, you ever see like glass where it's just like you can see light through, but you can't really maybe see forms, but you can't actually see clear through glass. Right? So you have these glasses that are like that. And you're kind of you're trying to make out the world through those glasses. It's like, well, I think that might be that, but I don't know. This is kind of, and then, slowly over time, those glasses start to clear up. The glass starts to become very clear, crisp. You can start to see through it. And then you start to see things. Oh, okay. I see it for myself. There's nothing to doubt. I see it for myself. You might even be like, how did I not see that before? I can't believe it. over the years and years of my practice, and that's happened to me at least 5 or 6 times, right? Because once you have an insight, it seems so obvious that you can't understand how you didn't see it before. And so as your greed and your hatred and delusion are lessening, so does your doubt. This is why somebody, a Sotapanna, has gotten rid of the fetter of doubt. Why? Because they've practiced enough. They've had a glimpse of nibbana. They understand that I'm on the right path. This path is true. Buddha's awakening is true. Everything's right. I'm going to follow this path to the end. There's no more doubt. And of course, any other kind of doubt, like doubt that maybe you have, which is the doubt that I have these days, that when it arises, is not the doubt of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. It's the doubt that I actually have the ability to like become awakened. Like, oh God, can I actually do this? At least in this lifetime, it's like, am I actually able to? Am I really getting there? Like, that kind of doubt might arise. But then I says, well, I don't know. All I can do is just keep practicing and moving forward, right? Because I'm not. So you can even have lots of doubts about lots of different things, and that's all because you just don't know. Doubts all vanish when one sees that. That's one of the chants. I think that's from the Dhammapada too. That's a chant that is in the Bhavana Vandana. Doubts all vanish when one sees that what has a cause, right? So basically, this lines are just like, once you see with insight, your doubts vanish. It's because you're deluded that you have doubts.
Thank you, Bante. Yes, of course you can make it in this lifetime.
Oh, we'll see.
Yes, you can do it.
All I can do is keep practicing.
And Manal says, while investigating non-judgment, it is noticed that the mind works really hard to differentiate between using discretion and not lean towards judgment of something or someone. Would this eventually become easier? Well, what comes to mind is that sometimes we can get a little bit confused and start thinking that being a good Buddhist means that we never have any judgment, that everything is okay, and this kind of like sort of kind of apathy that we think is equanimity and so forth. But that's not actually what we see, for example, even in the suttas. Like the Buddha is actually, it's not like, oh yeah, like I am neutral to everything, I have no view, or whatever. As in, like, yeah, of course he doesn't have any view in the way that we have, but he's actually pretty clear in saying this is wholesome, this is unwholesome, this is beneficial, this is not beneficial, and so forth. So actually what we want to preserve is critical thinking, and also not personalize it to the person that we have in front of us. So for example, we can acknowledge that perhaps a behavior is unskillful, or perhaps a behavior is marked by greed or by hatred or by delusion. That's totally okay. Whether we are doing it or another person is doing it, it doesn't matter. And we can also acknowledge it internally. We can go, okay, well, that's not terribly skillful, or that's not really conducive to an awakening. What we should really be careful of is not developing a conceit of superiority. For example, if we are in a workplace and go like, oh, well, I am so much better. Or like if we're with our friends that are not Buddhist, oh, look at all these minions here, following all these like sensual pleasures, not like holy me, where that I see everything, I've pierced through this common practice, and that's actually very unskillful. That is very much judgmental, and that's very much creating more suffering for ourselves and possibly even for others, because we will be quite intolerable and nobody will want to be around us. So there's a difference. Or also, like what actually Bhante was, the example that he was saying, oh, like, look at all these people doing these bad things, they're gonna go to hell, and then we might even go like, Buddha saves. That's also not particularly beneficial. So I feel like rather than in judgmental, why don't we think about it in terms of kusala and akusala? And when it comes to judgment, also another thing to point out is also not to predict where people are going, as I was saying, like different realms after their life, but also what they have done in the past. That's another thing that we can be very judgmental about people, like, oh, that's your bad karma, or that's whatever it is like that you're experiencing, because actually that's a product of our delusion, our defilements. That says something like that. And there's a sutta, I can't remember which sutta, where the Buddha actually reprimands a lay person that does, that talks about in terms of like, oh, this karma has led them to this and this other destination or whatever. And he's like, don't say that, foolish lady. Only one like me can actually say with awareness, not with speculation, but with awareness, like matter of factly, this is the product of this. Whenever we're in that position, it's just a bunch of papancha, and we're probably committing a lot of bad kamma, us right here, right there. So hope this was helpful, Manal. Something? No? And
we started out slow, but we have enough questions here. We're going to go to the end, I'm sure. It's getting so.
Okay, and Diego says, I don't think he'll have the time to answer this question, but just in case,
Wrong.
What would be examples of micchasati, wrong mindfulness? Did you want to take this?
Yeah. So, as can be found today, as many Buddhist monastics teachers are fond of saying, like, yeah, you could a sniper could have mindfulness and being aware of, a sniper has to crawl for hours and hours and be very mindful of even little twigs and all these kind of things, right? So mindfulness, this concept, this of focus and attention, can be both samma and micca. Right? The same thing, even Bhante Ji always likes to joke about micca samadhi, wrong jhana, right? So this is something good to know. So what would be an example of micca sati? You're so focused on something, whatever it is, uh, a romantic partner, food that's good, whatever, and you just put all of your focus and attention towards getting that thing, and nothing else matters, right? You're just totally focused on getting that thing, and whatever unskillful things you do along the way, that's not part of it. That's micca sati, right? You are totally and utterly focused and aware only of what you're focused on, like you have a tunnel vision. There's no sampajanya there. Sampajanya, clear awareness, clear comprehension. There's none of that there either in micca sati. So that's what I would say is an example of that.
Great. Thank you, Bante. Oh, good to see you, Yudi. And Jay Lyles says, would an anagami who should be free of sensual desire continue to smoke cigarettes or use similar addictive substances? I would say that sometimes, due to our cultural conditioning, we can attribute a little bit too much value to certain practices, like, for example, smoking. So today, for example, in this day and age in America, you're basically a pariah. Like if you are seen smoking, definitely in California. In New York, it's a little bit more chilled, more relaxed, but still, it's actually somewhat unusual. When we were in Italy, traveling with different monastics of different countries, all of them were just constantly commenting on how everybody was with a cigarette in their mouth, constantly smoking. And Bhante Smita was like, wow, Italians really like to smoke. Italians really like to smoke. And yeah, it's not even as much as they used to with me growing up. And definitely not even as much as when my parents were growing up, where, for example, there was not even the knowledge that it was harmful or addictive. As a matter of fact, I think even in this country, there were ads that the doctor was suggesting for people to to smoke. So my understanding is that even actually an enlightened being can, act upon habits that don't have a particular karmic moral impact, so to speak. So they will still, if they, they grew up in Thailand, they will still eat Thai food, perhaps even their favorite dish or whatnot. And if they picked up smoking, they might, keep on smoking if that's a habit. So we actually have lots of biographies of Thai forest masters that, in fact, were smoking. And it's just kind of like a quirky thing. It's not really anything that is, a mark of their characters. Right. I mean, once again, let's put things in context. There's so many yoga teachers who are all never touched a cigarette and eat, and they're fruitarians, but they don't have much wisdom. So maybe that's not really necessarily in those kind of qualities that we have to search for the Dhamma, but rather in something else.
No, good, yeah.
Oh, how is Stanley doing? He's still surviving. Yes, Stanley is our monastic cat who is always in fear, not in danger of dying, but he's very attached to life. I
Aren't
think
we all?
he in particular, though, he really loves life.
Oh no, I was saying in danger of dying.
Oh yeah.
But both, yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely intoxicated with life. So he's not.
He wants to hang out with the monastery as long as he can in this lifetime. Maybe he'll be a monk in the next lifetime.
Maybe so. And Julie says, what did the Buddha say about the speed of kamma? It seems as though the outcome of my kamma is speeding up as I'm following the precepts and doing mindfulness meditation. I feel like I'm playing a role in social situations because there is an increasing gap between the wisdom I'm developing for meditation to the conversations happening in samsara, like at my work. Where do we say it is considered lying and therefore breaking a precept? I'm careful not to manipulate or mislead, but I feel a little fake by playing this role.
Did Julie ask this question last night? Okay, yeah, because it sounds familiar, but yeah.
Do you want to take it, Bante?
Can you go back to the first one again? Okay, yeah, just leave it right there, so I can see all three. Very good. The Buddha didn't say anything about the speed of kamma that I know of. But so your actions that you perform can bear fruit in this lifetime, in the near future, in the far future, and in future lives, right? So there's lots of different opportunities for the kamma to ripen that you're doing now. But doing something like changing your life around, right? Doing things as you say here, following the precepts, doing mindful meditation, etc. This is your actions that you're doing now that are having, if not an immediate effect, but a slow, gradual effect in how you're living right here in this life. Right? So this is an example of, and of course, what you're doing right now doesn't necessarily just benefit this lifetime. It benefits future lifetimes as well. I feel like I'm playing a role in social situations. Oh, so playing a role. So meaning like you're not really engaged in social situations like you used to be. Okay, all right. So what's happening is you're developing insight. Your eyes are starting to open. You're starting to see things as they are, and you're starting to develop a little bit of what we call nibbana, disenchantment. Right? And all of a sudden, the water cooler chat with all your friends at work, it just doesn't seem as appealing anymore. Going out to the club and partying, just doesn't seem appealing anymore. Why don't I go to the monastery for the weekend instead? Right? That's you're developing insight, and your life is changing, and your priorities are changing, and things that were appealing and attractive and grasped you in the past are not doing so now. That's normal. Just keep going down the path, and then eventually you'll come to IA and you'll say, I want to ordain.
Maybe so. Sadhu. That's a nice happy ending. And I'll take an easy question from Elaine. Where is Bante Sudasa this week? So Bante is currently traveling in California for a couple of days to visit his preceptor. So he'll be back shortly.
California. We like slingshotted.
Yes.
I came back from California and he went to California.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's lots of monastics in California. We need to spread it around the rest of the country too.
Oh, Zen sends metta to the chat room. Oh,
hello, Sin.
Sweet. And TJ says, is there any confusion when chanting in Pali with Thai monks? For Thai chanting, ka is pronounced like ga, or cha is pronounced like ja, and vice versa. Is there any confusion when chanting in Pali with Thai monks? That's the same. For example, kamma is pronounced like gamma, or chitta is pronounced like jitta, and vice versa. I would say that for my experience, actually Thai monks are the ones that possibly have no problem chanting with at all, aside from the fact that I love Thai chanting. I think it's my favorite. Would it be my favorite Buddhist chanting? Yes, I think so. It inspires a lot of faith, actually, in my heart. I like that, and then I also like Japanese chanting. And I also, my first Buddhist monastery that I went to in this life was Santa Chitarama Monastery, which is a Thai forest monastery in the Ajahn Chah tradition, right outside Rome. So I feel like I have a karmic affinity with Thai chanting. So I never found it problematic, actually, this slight sort of pronunciation difference. I actually find it charming. And usually whenever we're chanting together, we all know the same chants. So overall, you kind of know what is going on. What I have a really hard time actually with is Burmese chanting. I never actually had the opportunity to chant with Burmese monks, but I did listen to them chant, and I didn't understand actually much because the pronunciation is so radically different.
Yeah, it depends on what you're used to. Like I have trouble with Thai chanting. Because not so much really. The main thing is the tone of so for instance, like when we chanted like a week or two ago, when we chanted Ratana Sutta or Mangala Sutta, like I had that pretty much memorized, and I was testing to see if how much I could remember. But what was happening is because I memorized it in a different tonation, a different rhythm, a different metric, a different all that stuff, then chanting it with somebody who has a totally different thing, it actually messes up my memory. Like I'll forget. I was like, what? Where are we? Oh, okay, now we're here. So yeah, it depends on what you're used to, and then having to chant along with each country is going to have somewhat different or very different ways of chanting. And the more you become familiar with the Pali, it becomes a little bit easier to roll with to flow with the differences of the gas and the kas and the was, using saying V as a W and things like that. It becomes easier to do that because you have that foundation of the Pali. So yeah, that's my response to that.
Great. And Zen says, I noticed a new tiny Buddha statue on the fireplace. Love it. Actually, we have two. One here and one there.
Are those Buddha statues or monks?
They're monks, actually.
Yeah.
Well, technically, they are Anu Buddhas. They're also Buddhas, but they're Anu Buddhas instead of Samma Buddhas. At least I decided they are enlightened.
All right.
They're arhats.
What's an Anu Buddha?
An arhat, like a Buddha that follows another Buddha. Samma Buddha, that
must be a Mahayana way. Okay, yeah. I've never heard that.
Pacheka Buddha and Anu Buddha.
Yeah, I know Pacheka Buddha.
According to the early Buddhist texts, did the historical Buddha have a shaven head or long hair worn in a top knot? Well, shaven head and the long hair worn in a top knot, I've heard that. I seem to understand that was actually a Greek invention when there was basically the confluence of the Greek Empire going all the way to Pakistan, Afghanistan, and so forth. And then they were like, well, this Buddhism sounds really cool, but they're missing statues. So essentially, they kind of created apparently the first statues, and they liked curls. So that kind of came into being as a sort of cultural syncretism.
Yes. Yeah. Buddha's head was shaved, and I've looked far and long for a Buddha statue with a shaved head, and I can't find one. Like if I ever have my own place, if there's a Buddha statue, I want the head to be shaved, but it doesn't exist for the most part. I think a lot of the things like the protuberance and the this and then that, and even like the ears and all that, these are related to the 32 marks of a great man. And these are debated as to whether they're later additions or the Buddha really didn't have these things, or so it's a complicated thing. But the tradition holds that but you can see literally, he is literally called as an insult in the suttas by Brahmins, a shaveling. Right? So if he has a long hair and things like that, they're not going to call him a shaveling. Right? And then there's the sutta where the king goes to try to find the Buddha, and he's looking at a sea of monastics and he can't find the Buddha. He's like, well, where's the Buddha? I can't see the Buddha in all these things. Right? So yes, he had a shaved head.
And Jay Lyles asks, is the glimpse of nibbana that a Sotapanna has a direct knowledge, for example, experience of nibbana, or is it something else? Bhante?
I'll be honest with you. I don't necessarily know exactly where the whole glimpse of nibbana thing comes from. It's not explicitly said in the suttas. It might be an implicit kind of thing. So I don't know that I can actually and also we can't explain and understand what nibbana is anyway. So how we wouldn't really be able to know what that glimpse is. But what's come down is that they have a very, very brief glimpse, like maybe even a fraction of a second understanding and glimpse of that state. And that was what helps them to eliminate their doubt. So I don't know that I can really explain it in more detail without knowledge of maybe commentaries and other things that I don't have knowledge of. So.
Yeah, I would just add that obviously they have the first realization of anatta, so that essentially our sense of self is dependently arisen. So I would say that might be the kind of big, hard sort of thing. Actually, if we even look at our experience, we can see what is the thing that we're holding on to so much. Well, our thoughts, our ideas, our political views, our likes and dislikes, our national identity or gender or blah, 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 like all these million attas. So once we see that all of these things are dependently arisen, all of them, and we start having this passion towards it, we realize that the teachings are true. Like we're actually tasting the water instead of just looking at the water. So maybe we haven't like drunk the whole bottle, but we're like, okay, well, I know what water tastes like. And obviously there's full confidence in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha because we just know. And we also understand how to hold all the different precepts, all the different observances, all the different rites and rituals, if you may, within Buddhism, because we have held them properly in order to get to that stage. And so we're not attached to them anymore. We're not attached to them and thinking that just by doing one particular practice, we're going to attain purity. So yeah, it's something experiential. It's something that we see. Like drinking a glass of water.
We're down to crunch time here.
Oh, 8:54. You're right. So Elaine says, what is the difference between becoming awakened versus becoming an arhat? That we actually were just talking about.
That's easy. An arhat is awakened.
Yeah. How can one know if an intuition or gut feeling should be heeded or dismissed? Usually dismissed.
Do you have an hour? Like I pretty much trust my intuitions. I always have. But other people
But they
don't.
got stuck you in samsara.
But other people, I've been in samsara. I don't think my intuition stuck me in samsara.
There you go.
But I think it's a hard question. It's not even really a Buddhist question, to be honest with you. But I the way I understand it in investigating intuition is, the less you lie to yourself and the more you do not accept lies and you're fully truthful, then your intuition will be more valid and more trustworthy. That's what my response.
Okay.
Actually, is it just all comments? All right. Yeah. Then it's, perfect timing. Oh,
last one. Well,
Diego also looked for a Buddha statue with a shaved head.
I love the depiction of the Buddha at the Tzu Chi Foundation in Taiwan. He's bald, standing, and touching the world. Oh, check it out. All right, excellent. Then we've tackled all the questions. So unless another question pops up, or if anyone here in the audience has any questions, I think that's all for tonight. All right, great. Then maybe we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sin is asking for a chant class.
Well, we'll think about that. But actually, public service announcement, there's actually a chant karaoke on, I hope there still is, on the Abhayagiri Monastery website. So if you search for Abhayagiri Monastery in California, they used to have all their chanting recorded, which, by the way, is beautiful. It's incredible. It's with Ajahn Pasano and Ajahn Amaro. So actually, it's kind of vintage because Ajahn Amaro hasn't lived there in quite some time. But it's beautiful. And also there is like a karaoke function where you can chant along with all the ajahns. So it's better than a chant class.
Also, they have their morning chanting, evening chanting in YouTube.
Yeah.
It'll print out the lyrics. The morning chanting's in Pali and in English.
Yes, and Samanera Mexico is also reminding us that actually they broadcast their chanting, morning and evening chanting on YouTube. So you can also check it out and chant with them because they put the sort of subtitles thingy. So perfect. There you go. Your chant class, your question and answer already made. So we don't need to do it. All right. Well, see you next week. May you all be well and happy, and may all good things come to you.